whether that was fair or valid or not. Surely someone's known someone like this. Even in the media, there are people like this. Well, this happened when I was in 4th grade. We had our spelling bee. Do you guys have a spelling bee here in Missouri? Surely. Yeah? Yeah, well, it was a big deal in Florida. Yeah, so we had it there, and the way it worked is it came to every elementary school in Florida, and every single class would have their spelling bee competition. And if you won the best speller in your class, then you had the competition with your whole school. And then if you won that, then you got to compete in the regional against other schools. And if you won that, if you made it that far, you got to go on ESPN, and they air the National Spelling Bee every year on ESPN. And again, if you're interested in watching some riveting television, I got to tell you, the Spelling Bee, it glued to your seat. But yeah, so that's how it worked. I want to make it very clear, we all failed every year of elementary school. I and everyone in my class failed miserably. We were all so bad at spelling. And it's tough, okay? I do want to make sure I point that out. But, okay, we all failed miserably. And this one year, one of the kids who went, his word was prestigious. Okay, it's on the board here. Prestigious. That's a pretty tough word for a 4th grader. Prestigious. There, you can see it there. That's how it's spelled. I mean, do we have any 4th graders in here? Kellen? I guess he would have gone back. I was going to have Kellen try and spell this word for us, and that would have been our entertainment for today. Right. And so this 4th grader, he goes up there. Your word is prestigious. Can you use it in a sentence? Language of origin, please. What part of, and it's like, come on, is this stuff really going to help you spell it, man? Just try your best and let's get it over with here, right? And so you've seen how it goes. And he finally he sums up the courage, starts spelling prestigious. P-R-E-T-T-Y. And the whole class burst out laughing. Ha! Pretty! That spells pretty! Ha! You're so dumb. Pretty boy, pretty boy, pretty boy. And for the rest of his tenure as an elementary student, he was known as Pretty Boy by our entire class because of this one mistake, because he couldn't spell prestigious. And that young man grew up to be the preacher at Overland Church of Christ. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It wasn't me. It really, don't laugh, don't laugh. It wasn't me. I was one of the kids laughing at this guy, and that's the point. Okay? I was laughing along. I was making fun of this kid, too, when I was in 4th grade, and it's important for this reason. I absolutely did not know how to spell prestigious when I was a 4th grader. You want to know a secret? I didn't know how to spell it now. I had to spell check it when I made the PowerPoint. That's a tough word. If I had been asked to spell prestigious in front of the whole class, I'd have gone up there and I'd have made just as big a fool of myself as everyone else in our 4th grade class when this young man went and spelled prestigious. But that fact did not matter to me one bit. All that mattered is that every single person in class was calling this guy Pretty Boy for the rest of his elementary school tenure. And you can probably understand very well how humans make a habit of not being fair to others when they criticize them or when they sort of categorize their actions. It's really unfair to make fun of the kid who misspells prestigious when you also can't spell prestigious. And this happens in the Gospel of John in chapter 20, and it's the text that David read for us here. Chapter 20, starting in verse 24. Now Thomas, called the twin, was one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said to him, "We have seen the Lord." So he said to them, unless I see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Okay? And so we read this last week. Jesus, resurrected Jesus, appears to his disciples, to his closest followers, after being resurrected. And everyone he appears to, of course, believes in him and believes that he's resurrected and believes that he is the Lord. And for whatever reason, I don't know if the text is clear, it doesn't tell us, Thomas wasn't there for that. And so he isn't convinced that Jesus has been resurrected from the dead. And he tells them, you're not going to convince me that Jesus is resurrected unless Jesus comes here and lets me touch his scars so that I know it's him for sure. And I got to tell you guys, This is pretty reasonable. If someone that we all knew had died and we'd mourned their death together, and then he or she came back from the dead and appeared to all of you, but I wasn't there for that, and then I came back later to the fact and you were all like, Nick, you're not going to believe it. They're back. They're resurrected from the dead. They're alive again. I would tell each and every one of you the same thing Thomas told his friends here. I don't know what kind of sick joke this is. I don't know why you're messing with me like this, saying that my friend is back from the dead. But I'm still grieving my friend. And people don't just rise from the dead. And so, again, I wish you guys would just stop telling me, my friend, that's really weird. I'm trying to grieve. And so, however rational of a response that this is from Thomas, it doesn't stop him from earning a nickname of his own. Do you know what Thomas's nickname is? Are you guys all familiar with this? Yeah, Doubting Thomas. That's right. Okay, so Doubting Thomas is the nickname he earns from these verses here. All right, let's read verses 26 through 28. And after 8 days, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst and said, "Peace to you." Then he said to Thomas, "Reach your finger here and look at my hands, and reach your hand here and put it in my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing." And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus appears again, and he sets the record straight here with Thomas. And after seeing Jesus resurrected, Thomas believes. And it is a cool detail. Thomas doesn't actually have to go through and put his hands into the scars or into his side. Seeing is believing for him. And I really, really want to emphasize how cruel it is that Thomas has earned this nickname, Doubting Thomas, because none of the other disciples believed in Jesus' resurrection until after they saw him or after they saw something either. I truly believe Thomas is up with the Lord right now in heaven, and he throws his hands up every time someone refers to him as Doubting Thomas. What do you mean, Doubting Thomas? Everyone was doubting. No one believed. I just am the one on record for it. So here's what we need to learn from this passage. It's that Jesus' interaction with Thomas here, this isn't about one of Jesus' followers and his doubts. That's not what this passage is about. Rather, this is about how Jesus handles doubt in his followers, in his disciples. Jesus doesn't dismiss when someone is doubtful or struggling to come to terms with who he is and what he has done. Rather, Jesus pulls them closer and meets that doubt with love and with reason. And both of those are really important. So let's look at the final verse of this section here. Jesus said to him, "Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Thomas had doubts, explicitly here. Every disciple had doubts. Every single Christian, every person here today, you have had doubts before in your life. Doubts before yourself and what you can do, your own self-certainty. From there all the way up to doubts in God, in your faith and belief in God. It's okay to admit that. These doubts don't scare Jesus. They don't threaten his divinity. Rather, they cause him to invite you to closer investigate who he claims to be and what he claims to have done. So firstly, doubt is not something to be scared of. Doubt is a starting point for faith. And the point I want to make here is that Christians have a habit of being scared of their own doubts. And quite honestly, Christians have a habit of shaming other Christians who have similar doubts to Thomas here. It's as if we measure our efficacy as Christians and efficacy of our faith not by how closely we're following Jesus, but rather by how certain we are about it. And I understand why that might be our instinct to do so, but I don't think that this is the healthiest model for measuring faith, especially considering how Jesus' closest disciples experienced that doubt, experienced that lack of certainty. Thomas says, unless I see his hands and put my finger in the print of his nails, I will not believe. Jesus didn't respond to this need of Thomas by saying, well, then I guess you have no part in me. Well, all right, Thomas, I guess I can't trust you to be my follower. I guess we can't have you pass communion trays next week, Thomas, since you have doubt. You know what, Thomas, maybe it's better if you don't come to church anymore. You know, if you don't even know if you believe this, maybe you shouldn't even come here anymore. No, Jesus doesn't say that, does he? Instead, Jesus took Thomas's doubt as an opportunity to inspire faith. And this is just good common sense if you think about it. Let me give you a practical example, the story I wrote down. When I was a youth minister in Orlando all those years ago, am I right? If I had a family that was visiting our congregation and they had children and were sort of coming to the youth group events and such in class, if I had that, and this happened multiple times, where we would have a family, they would come and visit, and they seemed interested, but they just told me they had doubts in how safe it is and how safe it is for their children to be in our youth program. I mean, let's be honest. Can the volunteers be trusted? They've been to churches before where the youth program just lets whoever do whatever and teach Bible class, and there's no supervision, and really a lot of protection issues. And so, again, I just don't know, Nick, if our children, if I trust them here. And I can tell you what I didn't say to them. And that's, I didn't say, well, fine, we don't even want your kids then. If you don't trust us, get out of here. No, don't come back. Go to the Baptist church up the street. Yeah, no, I never said that to them. And I'd have lost my job probably if I had. No, seriously, and this is true. I would get excited when someone would tell me, I have doubts about how safe your youth program was. And I would seize that opportunity to demonstrate to them how safe the youth program was. I would go and introduce them personally to our deacon of education, who oversees the curriculum and handpicks the teachers for all of our youth classes from preschool all the way up to high school. I would go and walk them through the process and the paperwork of how we had all of our volunteers are required to sign waivers when they're alone or if they're going to go on a trip with a student, and we make them submit to a background check if they're going to be a volunteer. I would go, and then this is what I would do. This was the most effective. I would just go introduce them to a family who had students in the youth group. And I would introduce them, and then I would leave, and I would let that family give input on what they thought of me or what they thought of the youth group or how their students were getting along. I mean, does all this make sense? When someone is secure enough to convey doubt to you, you have defined a starting point for how to convince that person to trust you, or for how to convince them to climb aboard with your program or whatever it is you're doing. And this is really important, this next thing I'm going to say. Any institution anywhere that punishes reasonable doubt is not a healthy institution. In fact, if an institution punishes you for doubting what they're doing or what their intentions or beliefs are, you need to get out of that institution, because that institution is trying to manipulate or brainwash you into what they're doing. And guys, I mean this when I say it. We cannot allow the church to become one of these institutions. And again, I understand how our instinct is, maybe this is a good idea, maybe this is the way to do it. You know, it would be a lot easier if we could tell people, stop asking questions, just trust us. It's what the Bible says, just shut up and stop asking questions. Please stop asking questions. I understand how that's an easier model, but I'm telling you, it is not the healthiest nor the best model for the church, for faith, or for any institution that exists anywhere. And this isn't the way this isn't present in John 20. Let's look at this section in Mark chapter 9. Jesus said to him, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. And immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Jesus, I believe, help me with my unbelief. I'm with you, Jesus. I believe what you're saying. I believe in you. But I still have some stuff I'm not exactly sure on. It still just doesn't all add up to me. Jesus, will you help me? The human condition is to doubt things and to be skeptical of things at first. If the thing you believe is true, then you have no reason to fear someone's doubt. If the thing in question is true, then you have no reason to fear your own doubts. Look at Jude 1:22. Be merciful to those who doubt. Your version might say something like, be merciful to those who are making a distinction. But this verse, this is NIV here. Merciful to those who doubt. Doubt has been present in the church since literally day one, since the morning of Jesus' resurrection. People doubted. We should have mercy on and embrace those who have doubt. And we as the church must learn to see doubt as a starting point for faith. Doubt isn't a sign of failure in faith, but rather a fertile soil where it can grow. Secondly, Jesus meets us in our own need and in our own doubts. Jesus says to Thomas after he appears, put your finger here, Thomas. And this builds on the point that I just made. Jesus doesn't rebuke Thomas. He doesn't tell him off. He doesn't call him names like maybe we would instinctively want to. He invites him to investigate his doubts and measure them against his own reason and rationality. Really, Thomas? I mean, you got to put your finger in. That's kind of weird that you want to put your finger in my scars, but go ahead. If it'll help you. If it'll help you believe, go ahead. See for yourself. And I want to take a second to tell you all this on top of what I'm already saying here. Your faith will hold up to scrutiny. Faith in Jesus and belief in God will hold up to scrutiny. If you have doubts about anything, look into it and don't be shy. Don't be scared. Ask questions. Your faith will hold up to reason and rationality. And I promise you, I mean, Christian faith has been around over 2,000 years at this point. I promise you, any doubt that you might encounter, someone smarter than you and someone smarter than me has had the same idea, has had the same doubts, and has probably written an entire book about it. There's nothing new under the sun. Your faith will hold to reason and rationality. Let's look at Psalm 103 here. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. For he knows how we are formed and remembers that we are dust. And so this verse isn't exactly about experiencing doubt in your Savior, but what it does communicate is that God has a father's heart, and he knows his creation intimately, and he knows what his creation needs to believe and to understand. So do not be afraid of God's reaction to our doubts, but be excited about how he will meet us in our moment of lack of understanding. Third, Jesus values faith without physical proof. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. This verse should be really exciting to every one of us in here because the first disciples had their doubts dispelled by literally, physically seeing Jesus resurrected from the dead. And that's not an option that's available to any of us here. So in order for us to believe, we must do so without physical proof. And while that is certainly a bit harder, Jesus pronounces a blessing on us for being able to do so anyway. And this is what faith has always been described as. Look at Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. Your translation might say, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Our faith in God can and should exist without necessarily needing to physically see him. 2 Corinthians 5, for we live by faith, not by sight. We should be influenced by faith in God, not needing to see everything in front of us in order to feel his presence. Last text for today. 1 Peter 1, 7 and 9. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even through refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Though you have not seen him, you love him. And even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. For you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. And so it's an important detail. Peter actually has his own doubting story that's pretty bad, a lot worse than Thomas's, if you ask my opinion. Jesus pronounces a blessing on those who believe without demanding physical proof. We should not be calling him Doubting Thomas. If anything, we should call all of the disciples doubting. Doubting Peter, doubting James, doubting Matthew. We have such a unique opportunity because we can believe in Jesus without needing physically to see him. And we can hope for resurrection before this life comes to an end. And we can love and serve our Lord before we ever even touch his scars. And to people like us, to people with this opportunity to believe as such, Jesus calls blessed. Today, as we close, let's always remind ourselves that faith isn't about having everything figured out necessarily. Rather, it's about declaring Jesus as my Lord and my God, and by being blessed for it. If you need anything at all, the lesson is yours. Come now as we stand and sing.